Welcome to the Support Raising Solutions podcast, where we help new and current ministry workers grow in being spiritually healthy, vision-driven, and fully funded Great Commission workers.
Welcome to the SRS podcast. My name is Mark Wilson, and I will be your host today. And I am delighted to have our guest, Ellis Goldstein.
Hey, Mark. Glad to be here.
Thanks for making time, Ellis. We're always delighted to have you on the podcast. And for those of you who don't know Ellis or are not aware, Ellis has been serving in ministry partnership development, coaching, and training others since 1981. So he's got 40 years of experience investing in Great Commission workers. Most recently, he was a national director for NPD in CRU. And we were joking just a little bit ago that he's seen a thing or two. And what we mean by that is when you train people in support raising, you realize they're people. It's not just a process or a system, but you get to see the challenges and the heartache and the disappointments that happen, and you get involved in their lives that way. And so that's what we're asking Ellis to come and talk about today. And so even in my own life, I was thinking of a couple situations where my family had some highly personal things going on with our children. And we were just really struggling. How and what and who do we share those things with? And how do we get the resources we needed for counseling and support? And it was a confusion. Like the time that the Lord really met us, but I know that inside I longed for some guidance. And so our topic today, we're going to have two parts, but it really is communicating when the information you have is sensitive or volatile. And so we're going to break that into two parts. Ellis and I are going to talk a little bit about what to say when you're dealing with something really sensitive to your family. And then a little later, we're going to talk about what about when somebody engages you on something that's really volatile. So thanks, Ellis, again for joining us today, and jump right in. Let us know. Let's talk about what are some things you think about when families are dealing with something that's really sensitive?
One of the things that, those of us that feel called to serve the Lord and, taking steps of faith to be with an organization, raise their support, there are times when we just wish, God, can't we be exempt from some of the hard things in life? And yet some of the people that are listening, either listening or know people and families that are in ministry that have had very difficult times. And the difficulties can be within the marriages. The difficulty can be, with some circumstances with their children. And sometimes some of the solutions for some of those circumstances have been for some type of special program. And I think, it's with those kinds of programs cost thousands of dollars, much more than the average staff member, has in pocket change. And so what do you do? And the question is, I think what the heart of the question is what do we share with our ministry partners? What do we hold back? And one thing that I really want to make clear is that there's some types of information that may be best that we don't share with people that support us. Just because we're supported doesn't mean that we're transparent about everything. And there's some good reasons for that. Let me just give you an example. So you have a family that has a child that is having a certain kind of behavioral issues. There's been some mental health issues that are going on, and it's to the point that it's beyond what the parents are able to handle. And so they have found some type of special program for their child, and they're just going through this awful, painful process of trying to figure out what to do. And so the question is that what aren't we expected to share all these things, in our prayer letters with those that support us? Aren't we supposed to be transparent? Is that something that we should do? And I would say that because people support us, and there's a lot of things that we are transparent about, but there are some things that we have to hold back some information that it may not be best. I'll give you an example. So you're going to put your child in a difficult program, and the child doesn't want to go, but yet for the sake of this child, they really need to be enrolled in this program. And it's easy to think, well, aren't we supposed to be transparent and share these things with those that support us? And I would say that just as, perhaps some of you or many of you hopefully are involved in a small group within your church, that becomes, a nucleus of people that you share life with. These are the people that have gotten to know you and can pray for you. And you may have some ministry partners that are close to you, that you have developed deep relationships and you can share things with them. But you may need to protect the privacy of your child. That what is going on in your family is not for everybody's ears, and you do not have to feel guilty about this. There's nowhere. I don't think there's 11th commandment that says thou shalt share every little thing that's private in your family. I think and you say, well, we need to raise some additional funds. Well, by the way, one of the reasons that you want to be careful about sharing is because you're protecting the privacy of that child. That may be so difficult, and that may put a wedge between you and your child when they understand that you have communicated some things, and the reason is that they are now embarrassed. Our role as a parent is not to embarrass our child. We need to protect them. Some things we can share, and some things it's wiser not to. So, what do you do when you need to raise money for something? For one of these programs? I think you go to a small group of people. Probably everyone that's listening has of all the people that support them. There are individuals who you have closer relationships with, people that you have built bonds with over the years, people that you may talk to on a regular basis. These may be the handful of people that you talk to. So the question comes up, well, how do I raise all of this money from this small group of people? Well, just as you have trusted the Lord to provide your support, you can trust him for this kind of situation. The determining factor on how many people we share with, in raising this kind of money is that sometimes it's best not to expand the numbers, but to keep it to a small group of people. And God can do it. He really can. And it's a step of faith, but keep in mind the need to protect the child. One other thing, like what do you write in your prayer letters when you're going through some difficulties in your with your children? I think I just read a prayer letter from one of our staff, and it was done so well, asking people to pray for some things, and it just shared just very, very few things, but you got the idea. Okay, this is something serious to pray for. They have a need for one of their children to pray for something. And it was okay that the specifics weren't there. And that's okay. That's okay to do. So sometimes you just don't need to share all the specifics. You don't have to write, my child is suicidal. My child is cutting themselves. My child ran away from home. I think you just want to be careful about how much you do share. Keep that to that smaller group of people. There is another level of crisis that I've worked with too. Unfortunately, Christian workers, missionaries, staff encounter the same marital struggles that those that we're seeking to minister to have. And sometimes those struggles can be very, very severe, where the marriage is really struggling. And so the question is, again, what do you share and what do you not share? I've seen one extreme where people just stop sending prayer letters altogether. And that's not good. I think, again, this is a personal opinion of mine, just, from the experience I've had. I think that when there are some marital issues, one, you need to make sure that you're getting the help from your organization and others that can really help you, and be courageous to do that. But your prayer letter is not the place to share those things. And I know that what can happen is you can feel, well, it feels like I'm being secretive. I'm not telling people. I don't call that secretive. I call it being just using some discernment. And I think the hard thing is, well, what do I write? Well, there still are things going on in the ministry, and you can write about those stories. I understand that the part of what you may be feeling is that my heart just feels disconnected from that because of the personal struggles that I'm having. And this is where you write the prayer letter by faith. You tell some of the stories. You can include just some normal prayer requests. But I think that in protecting your marriage, that you do need to keep some things private. And if at a time in the future when you have found that God is really taking you through the process and there's been healing that's there, then if both of you are comfortable, there's things that you can share at that point about what God has done. But again, you would share those things with a smaller, select group of people.
Great, Ellis. I mean, that's really insightful and compassionate. I did have one question. I wanted to know, when you were talking about the situation with the child, or maybe just whatever circumstance, you said there was a letter that they did it really well. Could you be specific about what you thought was done really well in that letter, so that we can give an idea for the audience to kind of know what some parameters might look like when you're writing out those prayer requests?
Yeah, I had a feeling you were going to ask me that, and I'm trying to remember the specific. I remember the impression that I had from reading the letter. To be transparent, I did know some specifics about this particular family, and I knew some of the issues that were going on. And so when I read the letter, it was more of with a critique of how do they do in communicating without getting real specific. And I think that what they shared in the letter was about a program that they thought would be best for their daughter, that she had been struggling with some things, but it didn't go beyond that.
Okay.
And so I think it said it very generally about struggling with some things, and a program that they were going to put her in that she was going to become a part of, that was going to help her.
Yeah.
So it was general like that. I know that limited type of information is not satisfying for everybody, and so perhaps you get a phone call or two from somebody who says, "Hey, what's going on?" It could be that those will be the kind of people, depending on your relationship with them, that you might share a few more things. Mark, there's another filter that I use. Sometimes more information doesn't help people. There are people that ask for more information out of just sheer curiosity.
Yeah. Not
because they can help you. And so there's some people that just aren't. Not everybody is able to handle some of the raw truth that might be going on in your family. And that's why you have to be discerning. Yeah. That you don't want to put people into a position where they're going to start making judgments about you without having the whole picture.
Yeah, that's really wise. I was thinking as you were talking there, we used to talk to our daughter, our oldest daughter, about how she knew when to trust somebody and how deep to share, because she would over trust and then get hurt, or people would judge her. And we didn't have a lot of advice, but we said, why don't you start with something small and see if they can be trusted with that, and how do they respond? Are they compassionate? Are they empathetic? Do they support, or do they immediately offer you advice and judge you? And I just wondered if you had any discernment that you could pass on to the people listening, that they could kind of think through in those kinds of categories when they're engaged, like who might show signs of trustworthiness. And
Well, when you think about the those that support you, there are some people that you have built relationship with. There's some who have reached out to you, and then it has been let me back up and look at it this way. There are people who support you, and there are friends who support you. And those friendships became friendships because of some commonality, because either one of you reached out to each other. You've shared more with each other than perhaps with some others. And so just like with any friendship, let's just remove the support from it. Just like any friendship, there are some that are deeper than others. And you know who they are. Those are the people that you would pick up the phone to call and ask them to pray about something, or text them and say, hey, I've got this going on. Would you pray about it? And you don't need to give much context to it. So I think it's the fact that there are people that support us. What it really comes down to, of the people that support you, who are the ones that you have developed deeper friendships with? Just the other day, I guess it was last week, I got a phone call from someone who has supported our ministry, started supporting my late wife, Colleen. And so this goes back probably, 52 years ago. And we've had this long relationship with her. And Colleen passed away. She continued to support my ministry. And I've watched this woman go through when she would go on vacations with her parents, to the time she had to take care of them when they were in ill health, and to the time they died, when she retired. And I watched her go through all the stages of life. And we've shared with each other over the years various things. That is a long-term friendship. And so there are some people that you develop these kinds of friendships with, of all the people that support you. There's probably an inner circle of people that you can probably name the names of the people, saying, these are people that we've got this special bond with. Those are the ones you can talk to.
Yeah, that's great advice, Ellis. And as you were talking, it sparked, and we have a member care leader on our team here in the organization that supports SRS. Her name is Jamie. But Jamie talks about, she said, if you think about your life or your person as a house, she said, there's some people who they knock on your door and you don't really know them. So they get, as far as they get, is the front porch, because you don't have a relationship. There are some people you invite into the living room, and some people that get to eat at your table, and some people that spend the night and they can stay in a bedroom. She goes, but then there's your bedroom, and your master bath. And she said that that's a really private, there's very few people. And so I just thought that was a really helpful analogy to think through the spectrums of people, and again, in dispelling the idea that you're not being honest, you're just being appropriately honest for the level of relationship you had. So I thought that you demonstrated that super well, Ellis. Yeah.
I like that illustration about how far do you invite him into the house. With me, if I invite him to join me in the garage and work on a woodworking project with me, and I let him use my tools, then they must be a close friend.
That's right. You got to personalize the analogy for you. Like, oh yeah, what's the room where only the safest people get, or the most trusted people? But I just wanted to reiterate a couple of things I heard, guys. One is, things happen and all of us struggle. And there are times when we need to slow down and figure out who we're communicating with. And then we need to think about the trusted people, the smaller group. And then especially if it's involving children or family members, we need to make sure we're honoring when we're talking about them, and we don't put them in a way where they can be they're just put at risk, to judgment or more harm. And then really communicating carefully and clearly. So I thought those were some really excellent points. And then even with your own marriage, just really protecting the sanctity of your relationship over the ministry. And I liked your point. I was like, there's still things going on in the ministry. That letter is primarily about what God's doing externally. It may feel weird, and it should. So thanks for that. Are you ready to transition on to our second question?
Sure.
All right. Well, this one will be. I'm anxious to hear what you have to say here. But as Ellis and I were talking, we live in a time where people are actively engaging other people in conversations about things they are extraordinarily passionate about. And those things can be volatile. And so they're often looking for some kind of response for you. And so Ellis has put a great deal of thought into this, has quite a bit of experience. But I'd love for any guidance you have for our listeners on how do you engage when somebody's pursuing that kind of volatile conversation, and what are some discernment, benchmarks, wisdom that you have for us to kind of handle those situations?
Let me start off with one that was almost a little comical, but it's not. I mean, it was very serious. So probably like, SRS, we get all sorts of phone calls from people that support the ministry. And so one person contacted our ministry, and it was going to be a political question that she had. And so I took the phone call, or I called her, and she said that she wanted to be really careful with who she was giving to. So it's sort of couched in good stewardship. And then she wanted to know, is CRU Democrat or Republican? And, so what do you do with a question like that? Well, first of all,
what do you do?
Yeah, what do you do? We have some guidelines on what we can talk about, what we don't talk about, what we can engage in personally. I'll be more specific with that in a moment. But as a staff member, my role is never to be where I am touting one particular candidate over another. I have personal opinions that our ministry is not to be seen as a ministry that is leaning in certain ways politically. And so I shared that with her. I said, and then of course there was some of the issues on abortion and some other things. And I said, of course, on those kinds of moral issues, we do take a stand. On the issues of marriages between a man and a woman, the biblical view of that we take, and we don't waver from that. And so in the conversation that I had with her, I said that we are neither, and because as an organization, we can't take we just legally we can't take a stand one way or the other. What becomes difficult is when people want to pin you down, and I think we'll ask certain questions. I think that sometimes it takes some discernment to understand why it is they're asking a certain question. Have there been some things that a person has heard or read, in Facebook or in some other form of social media? Have they picked up information? Have they heard some things, some rumors that were going around? And so when a question gets to you and a person asks you some questions about what is your ministry stand on some things, there's a person who's asking you what your stand is on some things, and then there's also what you feel compelled, unsolicited, to share with people. Let me tackle the first one, or the second one, feeling compelled to share some things. During the last few years, people have had strong opinions on a number of things, and I think there have been, people have misunderstood each other. There has been pain even within organizations and mission organizations, as people have different opinions on some things. I was doing some study for an article that I wrote, and where I was looking at the word wisdom in Scripture. I was just looking at Proverbs in this, and then I was looking at some of the words that were associated with wisdom. There was insight, there was discernment, and also I would add a word of being patient. I think that sometimes this is where a staff member with an organization can feel so compelled to make statements about some things. About some things that they feel are right or are wrong. And what we have to be careful about, I think, there's two different audiences. There's the audience within your organization of how you handle conversations there. There is the conversation that takes place not in the organization, but it takes place in social media. And when I joined our staff, Mark, that one of the things that I put aside was to have public discussions on my political views. That was intentional. Matter of fact, as a staff member, I can't have those kinds of conversations because I can't have what my opinion is to cause people to think that's what CRU believes in. We are not a political organization. We are committed to the fulfillment of the Great Commission. And that's where we were founded, and that's what we continue to be. And somebody can say, well, I think CRU needs to say some things about certain things. Or they can say that about another organization. And or I want to be able to be free to share what I believe. The discussion that you have between friends is one thing, but when we write things in social media, whatever platform we might use, what we have to remember is, while we may not identify ourselves with our organization, you are identified with that organization because you are a member of that organization. And when you become a member of your organization, you have to remember that whether you say you're with the organization or not, your ministry partners are reading this also. And what happens is they're thinking, possibly, is this what your organization believes? And it's possible that you raise doubts in the minds of those that support your ministry. I've had, I think it was 2 staff members, one that I know in particular, that there was they were taking a stand on some particular issues that were being discussed publicly. I don't mean within CRU, social media. They may have even written something in the Pro letter, which is an absolute no-no. You don't do that. And I can't remember if it was a he or a she that I talked to in this one, that that it was okay with the staff member if they lost a person's support over their particular opinion. And that's where I really believe that staff member crossed a line. That is, first of all, the people that support me, they're not supporting me. I mean, yes, they're giving for my ministry. They are legally giving to CRU. They are not my supporters, no matter how. I mean, I know that internally we talk about those who support us as our, these are my supporters, my ministry partners, and we take great ownership over that because it can affect your paycheck. I understand that, but legally and biblically, they're not mine. And to say it's okay to lose a partner over my opinion, that is just wrong. Is because what I've done is that I've stopped somebody from what I have said from supporting CRU. I've given the impression that I was a spokesperson for CRU. And when I voice if I voiced a particular opinion politically, so or one of the issues of the day, I think that that it is so important that we use discretion, no matter how compelled we are. And there are some issues that are really worth fighting for. That if people are being treated inappropriately, that if people are being harmed, I get upset as a Jewish believer when there's a rise in anti-Semitism, which there has been, and Jewish people are attacked. And by the way, nobody's ever asked me how I feel about Jewish people being attacked. It's interesting that but that's another story. And so yes, it's that there's some things that they're just absolutely wrong within our culture that we can say are right or wrong, but we have to be careful about the platforms that we're using. I personally don't. It's just a practice of mine. I do not write about any of the issues in the newspaper, in social media. Matter of fact, I rarely participate in social media, and that is done intentionally. I know that people feel free to do that, but the problem with communicating in social media is it's not a dialogue. It's actually a pretty poor way of it really what it becomes is a one-way communication.
Yeah.
But again, I go back to something I've picked up from where somebody said it's okay if somebody stops supporting me over what I believe, I told one person, I said, whether I didn't quite say it like this, but it's whether you like it or not, when you communicate your opinion publicly, not on your prayer letter, not through your prayer letter, not through any official CRU correspondence, your ministry partners see that what you say is representing CRU, and you say, well, it's my opinion. It doesn't matter. That's how they see you. And so when I joined our staff, that is one of the commitments I have made, is that I am very careful about the opinions that I will ever voice publicly. I don't voice those kind of opinions through social media, because I don't want people associating what I say and saying, well, that must be what CRU believes. And where it is definitely out of place is to talk about some of those issues in your prayer letters.
Well, thanks, Ellis. That's good stuff. No, we had you put out 2 items for us, and we worked on the second one. The first one was, what might be some tips to respond when somebody is engaging you on one of those things? And I wanted to get back to that because I think like you laid the foundation of why. Let's talk about how now.
Okay. All right. I think that, I think there's a couple different approaches. One approach could be, so Mark, you asked me a certain question, and I could say, Mark, I know that's an important question to you, but why is it? Tell me about why you feel that is an important question for me to answer for you. And so it could be that what they're asking is this what your organization believes? Is this a practice of your organization? Is this what you personally believe? And so I think sometimes it's okay to push back slightly and to find out the reason that they're asking that question. I think that's one. Somebody says, "No, I just really like to know, how you're, what your particular stand is on this kind of thing." And what I would feel free to say to a person is, I would say, as a staff member with CRU, I don't engage in conversations where I'm going to give my opinion on that particular issue. If you were to ask me, do I believe that abortion is wrong? I would say absolutely. So if you're going to ask me about a moral belief, I will answer that question. If you're going to ask me, do I believe in same-sex marriage? And of course, I'm going to say no, that I don't. Now, people need to be reached for Christ no matter where they stand sexually. But know that my viewpoint and the viewpoint of our ministry is that it's traditionally biblical, and that is that one man, one woman in marriage. So I think it's okay not to engage in certain conversations.
Is there anything, well, one, I wanted to really affirm, you talked about wisdom earlier. And I think one of the things that goes along with wisdom is seeking to understand, which is what you're asking, and understand what they're trying to do. And then you can engage from a point of well-reasoned engagement. Would you refocus their attention on anything? Is that a bad strategy? Like to say, hey, those things are important. You said that earlier. These are important issues. Yeah. And we're primarily focused on this. And we don't want those things to, would you do something like that? We feel like those things might impede us, or they might get us off track of what our primary goal is.
Yeah, no, I think that's very wise, Mark. I think that asking him, saying, to be able to say, Mark, can you tell me a little bit more about why you're asking that question? And what I'm trying to find out is, again, are there some things that you have heard, that people are saying about my organization? Because I think that's important. And I think what I can do, if I am knowledgeable in it, let's say it comes down to that, it's really about this is what I have heard.
Yeah.
Because I think that there's going to be that I think is probably more common, saying this is what I've heard about your organization, and if I can answer it, I'm going to. If I can't answer it, I'm going to say, I haven't heard that, but I'd be willing to engage with some of our leaders and ask and saying, is this a question that people is asking about us? And then I'll get back to you with our answer on that. But if it's, somebody says, this is what I've heard that you're leaning this way, then I think what you can say, well, that's not accurate. In other words, first of all, you need to be, if you can answer the question, I think what you can do is you can say, well, what you just told me is that this is what you have heard. What I can tell you is that's not totally accurate.
Yeah.
And so I think we can do that. I think we can be honest. Now, what we shouldn't do, and this is where you got to be careful about where you cross a line, is it my role at that point to talk about a particular issue and to give my opinions of it? If it's a moral issue, I mean, a black and white moral issue of abortion, man and woman in marriage, that yes, I can speak on that, and we'll do that. So I think we just have to be careful what we choose to answer, what we choose to engage in, and again, remembering that what we say reflects. Remember that you're a member of an organization, and what you're communicating, people can interpret that and will most likely interpret it saying, oh, this must be what your organization believes in.
Yeah, I like that point a lot, Ellis. That we sometimes in America, we have such a strong view of individualism and my rights, my opinion, and we lose sight that there is impact. We don't live in a void. And so we do have to really be careful of speaking unintentionally for the greater community. And that it actually isn't a loss, where, like you said, I like that you're still acting and doing, you're a good citizen in the nation, voting on what your convictions are, but you're being careful representing the family of God and your organization and the way you speak. And I like that a lot. I thought there's two passages of scripture that always intrigue me, when you look at the context. And the first one is when Joshua, he's leading a military campaign into the promised land, and he meets the angel of the Lord, and he says, whose side are you on? Are you on their side or our side? And the angel of the Lord, you remember what he says? He says, I'm on neither. I mean, God is on his own side.
Yes.
we like to think that we have him. And that just always baffles me. And he's going to do what he needs to do. And it's right. And it's true. And then the other one is, Acts 1:6, right before he talks about to the ends of the earth, the disciples are asking him, will the kingdom come now? Speaking of, will Israel get back in political power? It's really a political statement. They're, anyway, they were ruled by the Romans, all those things. And he says that's really none of your business. I want you to be my witnesses, and he lays out Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth. And I thought, wow, I can't get distracted by some of these other things. It doesn't mean I'm not a good citizen,
Right.
but I have to have a hierarchy. The Great Commission first, loving my neighbor, and then I do engage in injustices by voting and being a good citizen, but I got to be careful that those things don't impact my ability to do. And so I like those. This little hobby horse for me. I love those two passages.
I really love the way that you just responded. That is so good, Mark. And this is where I go back to where somebody says, I really think your organization needs to be more involved in such and such. And at that point, what I can answer them is that God has called our organization to first be involved in reaching people with the gospel. Mm-hmm. That is what he has called us to do. What you've talked about is something that is important, but that is not a part of what our mission is. Now, there are, I think that as Christians, there's that as a staff member, I can be totally involved with my ministry, being focused on what God has called me to do. And this goes back to what he's called me to do. And that is to be involved in seeking and saving the lost. I'm to be a partner with the Lord in that. These other things, it's like, I love volunteering at if this was something that I did, I love volunteering at the local homeless shelter. I love volunteering, in church, that we're meeting, women who have been abandoned, and they're trying to raise their children. It's like different things that we can be involved in through our local churches, but it doesn't mean that while these things are important, it is not my role, and God has not called me to say that my organization now needs to be involved in all of these things. Not at all. Is that God has called us to a singular purpose. But it doesn't mean that I, as a Christian, cannot be involved in these things through my local church and in other ways.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right, because it could really prevent people from being able to hear. Depending on any one of those choices, you could alienate unintentionally a group. And like Paul says in Corinthians, I chose not to take my rightful support, my financial, because I didn't want you to be hindered from hearing the gospel.
That's right.
Yeah. And so I think that it's that weaker brother. I mean, it's that idea, like it's prevalent through scripture, and I mean, it's there. So the guys, you guys all know these things. We're just trying to bring you some clarity as you are engaging. And the other thing I wanted to say, Ellis, too, is most organizations are writing some sort of social media policy that's in your staff handbook. So I would encourage all of you guys to go read what your organization has said about how you represent, and and just think, even in the business world, plenty of people have to work really hard when they're representing their business. They have to be really careful that they don't conflate what they believe and represent the business, and they lose their jobs, and they're like, well, that's not fair. Well, it's not fair to you for you to, tell everybody else what the business does or doesn't believe. That's the business's job. And so I think we squirm at that a little, but it's a different perspective. So thanks for saying all those things, Ellis. Any final thoughts here? These are really rich nuggets. And
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just saying, invites wisdom, and I appreciate it.
Well, one thing that I would encourage those of you that are listening to do, that when you have strong opinions about things that are going on within our culture, there are and you think that your ministry needs to be more engaged, or it needs to be a topic of conversation, there are wise ways to go about having those conversations. It's that, let's not forget that we are not to be divisive, that we are to love as Christ loved, that in an organization there will be people who have different opinions. And the way that we go about a discourse is not by going on social media and writing about our organization. The way that you do that is that you have conversations with the appropriate people within your organization. There are some conversations that do need to stay within house. And if your leadership makes a decision and says, this is the direction that we're going in, then our response needs to be, God, you've called me to this organization, and this is the direction that we're going in. And so I need to be obedient, and that's the direction that I'm going in. But you're free to engage in things, in addition to that. But I would just say that there is a way to engage in conversation within your organization in appropriate ways, and there are some not appropriate ways. The public media is never an appropriate way to discuss your organization. It never is. That it is always to do it with the appropriate people. And let me say a hard thing. Let's say that you are at a place where you fully disagree. And if in good conscience, you just cannot agree, whatever the issue might be, then at that point, then you're pretty close to knowing that God is no longer calling you to that organization. Now, it's not that I want you to leave your organization, not at all. But there are appropriate ways to have a discussion, and there's some ways that are inappropriate and just not best. And so we need to keep those things in mind. But most of all, don't forget your first love. That we are to first love the Lord, and we are to love our neighbor, and we are to engage in conversations that promote unity and a discussion, and that our fellow workers within our organization are not our enemies.
Yeah, great word, Ellis. Thanks for that thought and for that invitation to do things wisely and to not have discussions that belong in the family, but with people who are uninvolved. That's a great way to end this. And so I hope today has been helpful and clarifying for all of you in the audience, that you've got some insight on whether you're dealing with really sensitive personal things or you're dealing with very public volatile things, that we've provided you some insight and perspective and even some tips on how to engage those. Thanks for listening, guys. We hope you're blessed and that your ministry partnership development efforts are fruitful and that God is engaged in multiplying the Great Commission through your ministry. So have a blessed day.
Thanks for joining us today, and please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode as we work to give more insight into building and maintaining your ministry partnership team.